Hi everyone,
Hi.
thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about a topic that many people living with mental illness experience but really struggle to talk about, and that's the topic of suicide. We know that 1 in 4 people are going to have a mental illness in their lifetime, and suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. It's actually the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34. All of us here, including me, have experienced suicidal thinking or actual suicide attempts. And I want to, first of all, thank you for being here and thank you for your bravery and your honesty. It's my hope that we, through our stories and experiences, can help other people that are struggling with this topic. So, my first question would be, what was going on in your life, Marie, when you started having suicidal thinking? And what got you to the point where you thought that death was a better option than being alive?
It started actually when I was 13 in 7th grade. And I've had several suicide attempts since then when I came here to the United States. But the worst one was when my husband passed away in 2015. And that was I would call it successful suicide attempt. I actually went through it and I disappeared. I disappeared for 3 days and I was in a coma during that time. And then my son found me and that was the worst one, but I came back. I was in a coma for 3 days, but I was revived. I came back.
Did you tell anyone that you were thinking about committing suicide?
I actually left a suicide note in my car for my son.
Okay. But beforehand, you didn't tell anyone that you were having suicidal thoughts?
Back in the Philippines when I was 13, I left a suicide note for my parents, but they thought nothing of it because they didn't know what it was. They didn't know how to deal with it. Yeah.
George, what was going on in your life when you started thinking about committing suicide?
I moved to Park Terrace Boarding Care up here at 545 Laurel, and it used to be a boarding care, 41 guys in it, and I moved there, and it seemed pretty bad. But I asked the owner when I got alone with her in the office as to how I could get out of this system I was in, the boarding care, and lead a normal life, and she convinced me that once I walk in the door of her place that my life is over. And that she would prefer if I die in Patton, and she got pretty explanatory about what was going to happen. So I decided, well, I didn't want to go die in Patton. So I'd heard about that place. So I walked out onto the bridge. About an hour later, I walked out onto the bridge and jumped off. I never told anybody.
You never told anyone?
I never told
Was
them.
it something that you planned, or was it?
I never really planned on it until about that hour, that 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
That 1
Wow.
hour. And I had talked to some of the roller skaters that we used to roller skate there, and they had told me that people jump off there all the time. They jump right down there and they die. And if you want to die, jump right there. But they didn't want me to, and they were calling it to me, don't do that, don't do that. But I jumped off anyway.
So what was going through your mind when you jumped off the bridge?
Fear, cold, darkest fear I've ever felt. And I turned around to grab the ledge, and I was like that far away. And then I realized I was probably going to die. I was going to die, that's what I felt. And I passed out.
Okay.
Everything turned black.
And what happened afterwards?
I felt like I fell into a giant hand, and it lowered me down to the ground. And when I hit the ground, I could tell because I hit here, and a big flash of white light came out when I hit the ground, and then sparks flew for about 2-3 minutes. And I knew then that I was alive, that I hit the ground and I was alive, and I felt God had saved me, kept me from dying like everybody else did. And then I got up, and they said the roller skaters who were looking down at me timed it. They said I was only down there for 5 minutes before I got up and walked back to the boarding care.
So you went back to the boarding care?
I went back to the boarding care, which was my home.
Did you tell them what had happened?
I think the roller skaters, because I went up to the bed and started trying to sleep because my head hurt. And I didn't think anything of it, but then the roller skaters came in and told the manager, George just jumped off the bridge. What's wrong with him? And she came up and says, you're going to Patton, you jumped off the bridge. I said, I'm going to Patton. So cops came and convinced me, yes, you're under arrest, you're going to Patton.
Okay.
So I had to go to Patton for like 3 months.
Okay. James, what about you? What was going on in your life when the suicidal thoughts and the attempts started?
Mostly too much dope and bad romance,
Okay.
you know, and it caused me to feel that I couldn't continue if things didn't go the way I thought they should be going. But I was the only one that thought they should be going that way, not
Okay.
my partner.
Okay.
And I came to believe I couldn't continue to live feeling like that. So I didn't want to live.
And did you express that to anyone? Did you tell anyone?
The second and third time, both, yeah, I told a friend, and they kind of tried to talk me out of it, and they tried to mediate with me and my significant other, but the mediation was a failure, and because I continued to do drugs, my state of mind just deteriorated,
Mm-hmm.
and it all ended up going bad, until I unsuccessfully attempted to end my life.
Did you have a plan? I mean, did you plan it out? Or was it like spontaneous?
Well, the first time, it was like I decided, because I went to jail and I lost my old lady because she went to the connection. He got busted with 19 keys, and so I thought she was gone and I didn't want to live anymore, and I just stepped out in front of a bus. It wasn't something that was planned. The second time, I stayed awake for 3 months, thinking that if I kept being awake, it would eventually kill me.
You would just wear yourself out.
Well, I just kept doing dope.
Yeah.
And I just thought that my body would deteriorate and shut down. And I got arrested, and that brought that to an end. And the third time I cut my wrist, and it didn't work.
Jackie, I know we talked earlier about the planning the suicide. Can you talk a little bit about your attempts and what was going on in your life?
I think the biggest thing, now that I think back upon it, going in and out of the hospital so many times that I just gave up. And seeing people who told me, well, my sister committed suicide, or my brother, I've never known anybody in my family that's committed suicide. But seeing that hopelessness, and to hear them talk about it, and when I started thinking for myself, that's how I felt, that was the first time. And that's when I tried to walk in front of traffic. The most, I think, close to being successful was when I drove my car for 400-foot cliff
Mm-hmm.
and planned it. I mean, it was premeditated. I went to the place before I went to shoot off the cliff with my car, and decided it would be there. The time of day would be in the evening. My main thing was I didn't want anybody to be so upset that it traumatized them. I was to myself. I thought, this has to be something I do. Nobody else has to see this.
Okay.
When I planned it, it was a time of night that I knew nobody would come down that road. Which I said now, that looking back on it, it was like, how much was I committing suicide? I put my seatbelt on because that was such a habit.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went flying off that cliff, I could hear the trees breaking, my car flipped over, every piece of glass, literally in my car, it was an SUV, was shattered and coming at me. The seats fell back, they broke, and when I landed, the first thing I thought was, oh God, you don't want me to die. And I stayed there all night, just all night, because
In the car.
in the car. The next morning at dawn, when I wanted to get out and go back home, I had to pull onto branches and things like that to pull myself up. It probably took me 3 hours. And when I got to the top, someone found me, called 911, and an ambulance came. They took me to the hospital. Because they thought that something was wrong, but not a scratch. I didn't have one scratch. And once I got there, my sister found out, because I'd been missing.
Mhm.
that all that day, and normally I would have been home. And sure enough, she said, "You tried to do it, didn't you?" And I had done it before, trying to do sleeping pills and the running for the traffic. So I just said, "Yeah." I didn't talk to her about it. It was totally premeditated, totally. After the fact, I was able to talk about it, but not before the fact. And people came to me and talked about, preventive things and, cognitive behavior and listening to music and doing all these things. And I thought, no, I didn't care about my family, my daughter, nothing. I was that hopeless.
So there was nothing that would have made a difference
No.
at that point.
And all I could think of were the people who had done it, that had succeeded. They must have felt like I felt, but they had such a real, true feeling of nothing. They had to go through with it.
Mhm.
And I guess at some point, I must have thought, I can't do this again. I cannot do this to my family. I can't do this to myself. It was a combination of feeling that I wanted to live and that I didn't want to hurt anybody. And I mentioned that to this day, my mother doesn't accept the fact that I have a mental diagnosis. And my dad said at the time that I tried, he said a little bump in the road. And all I could think was a bump in the road. It was so serious. But that was how he reacted to it. And like I said, my mom has never accepted it.
Marie, was there anyone in your life who missed what was going on? Was there anything that would have helped?
What you mean they missed the signs?
Yeah.
Well, when I was younger, growing up in the Philippines, mental health was not a priority there. So my parents weren't educated about me having depression. All they
Okay.
thought was I had a nervous breakdown. Well, I was diagnosed with nervous breakdown, was taking Valium for a year, taken out of school for about a year. And that was all the help I got. I didn't get any other kind of help. So, because of that culture, and the parents not being educated about that, they
Mhm.
missed a whole bunch of stuff. And I was just
Okay.
suffering every single day, not knowing what was going on with me and not getting the help. And then now when I came to the U.S., I realized there's a whole bunch of help here. So, but my family now, my husband knew I was seeing a therapist and psychiatrist. I was taking pills. So, but it was hard for him to accept the fact that, I would go off or whatever, depressed.
Yeah.
And now my son is the one who's having a really hard time with me. Because my daughter-in-law is more perceptive with my feelings and what's going on when my moods change and everything, up and down.
Mhm.
But my son is having a hard time accepting the fact that my mom has a mental illness.
Okay.
He sees the signs because he sees my moods changing, but he doesn't know how to react, how to help.
What's different now? What do you do differently now?
Well, I see a therapist now, and I go to a group at Kaiser, and I come to the clubhouse, and I talk to friends, and I take meds.
Mhm.
So all of that is helping the symptoms.
Did all of you keep your suicidal thinking a secret? Did any of you tell anyone?
I never
I
told
didn't.
anybody.
Never.
No,
Mm-mm.
never.
I told someone a second time.
Did it make a difference?
It just turned into part of the process. Because what I was attempting was taking so long already, and it just turned into another part of something that didn't work either
Okay.
to make things like I wanted them to be.
So for Marie and Jackie,
Mhm.
both of you went to some length to plan your suicide attempts.
Yeah.
At that moment, when you actually, Marie, when you were in your car taking
Pills.
the pills, or Jackie, when you were driving off the cliff,
Mhm.
what was going through your mind at that moment?
As I was writing I took the pills and the alcohol, and I said, this is it, I don't want to come back. And I'm going to make this, successful. Because I figured if I took enough pills and I took enough alcohol, it would kill me. As compared to before, I just played around with it or whatever. And then when I was writing the suicide note, I told my son, I love you, goodbye, but I can't do this anymore.
And what was so bad that you wanted to die? I mean, you can't do this anymore. What do you mean? What did you mean by that?
Well, then that night after my husband died, my son and I had a big argument. And they were living with me then because they were trying to support me. But for some reason, I couldn't deal with that anymore. That, I mean, the argument could have just been a small thing, but it kind of triggered me to, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I kept telling him, I cannot do this anymore. I give up.
Did you feel that way,
Yes.
Jackie?
I think it's a hard thing to explain about giving up hope and having no hope, not caring about your family, not caring about your friends. It's what you want to do. I have this plan. I'm going through this plan, and as far as that's concerned, it was going to happen. And when it didn't, I think I was so devastated. That's when I tried 2 more times. And the last, running into traffic, and James mentioned this when he went, it was a big 18-wheeler, and I just knew this thing was going to kill me. And they stopped and screeched on their brakes just close enough not to hit me. Everybody thought I had just run across the street and just didn't think about it, literally. And when my therapist, because that's where I was going to the restroom, and her restroom was outside. And I saw the traffic, and I thought, okay, this is how I can do it. When it didn't happen, she's, Jackie, we're going to have to take you to jail. I have to call the police. And being in handcuffs and going, I was so humiliated. I thought, oh wow, this would happen. If you try to kill yourself or another person, you're going to jail. And at that point, I think that was probably my last time of really thinking that there were consequences that I didn't want to go through, but the car was the last time. The first time was pills, second time running into traffic, third time running my car off the cliff. And each time I just felt hopeless. There was no, I didn't think about anybody. It was all about me dying, period. And I don't know if anybody had talked to me as I think about this to even see the signs, but when I did it, I had all kinds of opinions of people telling me what I should have done. And for me right now, it's being able to talk to somebody. I mentioned to them about being so depressed that you see somebody think, oh my goodness, maybe they're or going through divorce or going through a breakdown with or marriage, or, I mean not a divorce, but also breaking up with somebody in their life. Because there's so many times that a young man or young woman falls so in love they think, I can't live without that person. And seeing that happen, I've had talk with people, and one of them told me, wow, Jackie, just hearing your story helped me. You know, I said, it's the worst thing that you do, not only to your family, but it's what you leave behind in terms of what your legacy was. You know, Jackie committed suicide, and that'll last me forever with my family. I'm with them forever.
James, what was different for you after the suicide attempts? What changed that got you to the point where you are now?
I think the main thing was the second time. At the end, I went back to prison and they put me on psych meds, which started me on a cycle of psychotropic medication and therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had since then numerous psychologists and therapists and psychiatrists and groups and all of that. And reaching the end of my criminal career also
Okay.
caused me to change the way I look at the future and the possibilities that are there instead of the possibilities that aren't there, because that's what I used to focus on, was what I didn't have instead of what I could have.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think about what I want and how to get it, not what I want that I don't have. And I don't know exactly when that change in thinking happened. It just kind of did gradually while I was in recovery and sober living, and it changed the direction of my focus.
Okay.
And now I think about what I can make happen instead of what isn't going to happen. And,
So it's a different mindset.
yeah, totally, totally, a complete 180 degrees.
And that's what you go through. That's what you go through.
George, what's different for you today? You're a pretty positive guy.
When I was at when I was arrested and taken to Patton and trained to understand that suicide is not an option, that it is illegal, that I would most likely live if I tried it again, like I did at that time, and I would be punished, and I didn't want to go through that again. I never want to do that again either. So they pretty much 3 months of that made me change a lot of my thinking, and also the fact that what she was describing to me that made me think I better die my way instead of her way, which they said this is not what goes on here anyway. So I understood
In Patton.
in Patton. So I understood that I had been misled in the first place, and I allowed myself to be duped, and
Okay.
I pretty much took it out on myself.
How do you take care of yourself today?
I take care of myself pretty good as best I can. With SSI no longer paying rent on an apartment, no apartment. I'd like to live in an apartment again, but I can't. So I try to make do and be as positive as I can.
Do you see
I
doctors?
believe positive. Well, yes, I see the psychiatrist. I don't see the psychologist anymore because they kept conflicting with the psychiatrist and in their advice. So I just stopped seeing one. I chose the other. Of course, I had to get medicine, so I saw the psychiatrist. The Safris really is what's helpful the most with my schizoaffective disorder.
Okay, and that's a
It's
medication.
an antipsychotic, yeah.
Okay,
And it works. It works really well.
okay.
My family was so afraid that I'd try it again when I came back to San Diego. Voluntarily, I went to a lockdown place for 1 year,
Okay.
and it was not fun. It wasn't Patton, because I had a cousin who went to Patton, and murdered people who lived in Patton. But this place had people that came close to killing people,
Mm-hmm.
and to be there for a year, it was probably the worst thing I could have ever done, and I went voluntarily. It almost cured me more than anything of ever thinking about it again.
To just be in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone now who is experiencing suicidal thinking, someone who's planning to kill themselves?
I think the first thing that I do is talk about what they're going through. Try to talk to them and get them to talk to me
Mm-hmm.
to find out if that's where they're going. That's the direction. Then I'll say something like, well, you want to hear a story? I tried it 3 times. And give them my story. It's like, you did that? He said, yeah. I said, but through my wanting to live more than wanting to die after the fact, and especially after the 3rd time,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely turned my life around. And I thought, I had hopelessness, and what I did was I found hope. I said, whatever you're going through right now, what is it? Well, my wife divorced me. Well, my boyfriend broke up with me. It's usually somebody going through that kind of thing that has to do with
Mm-hmm.
they're loving so much and having to leave it. And that's probably because maybe that feeling of, this way I'm going to do it, is going to make them feel bad. And I'm
Mhm.
getting back at them. And that's a big thing. But I haven't had anybody that I've talked to ever do it. I think my talking to them has definitely helped. And then there's a suicide hotline if you ever feel like you want to do it. There are ways to get a therapist. I mean, just giving them things that they can do. So you're not just talking to me, but getting professional help.
James, do you think is that a myth that people try to kill themselves to hurt other people?
No, I don't think so. I think sometimes that's might be a primary motivation. Because I know the last time I tried to kill myself, I thought, this will teach her. When I started cutting myself, I
Mhm.
thought, she's going to come home and find me laying here on the bed, dead, and that'll teach her.
Mm-hmm.
And part of why I was doing it was because I wanted to impact her in a way that it would change her for the rest of her life in a bad way.
I see.
You know?
Mhm.
And so I know I was thinking like that when I tried, so I think that happens too, that it'll be like, well, this will teach her.
What would
You know?
you say to someone that might be having that thought process? Or just the thought process of wanting to kill themselves? What would you say?
Whatever you're going through, is gonna stop eventually. It's gonna come to an end. And if you try to think of a way to make what's hurting you stop happening, that's better than killing yourself, because killing yourself isn't fun.
Mhm.
And there's nothing that can be more important than being alive. Because if you're dead, you're gonna miss out.
It's over.
You did.
Yeah, you can't fix that.
Marie, you had mentioned being close to someone here in the clubhouse that actually committed suicide. Can you tell me a little more about the relationship you had
With her.
with her and how it affected you?
Because the day before, I don't know how many days after when she actually committed suicide, but I remember she still kept coming back here, and she kept saying nothing works. She's been in and out of the hospital, and she kept saying nothing works anymore. And I actually related to her because I knew exactly what she was saying. In and out of the hospital, sometimes it doesn't work anymore. You know? I mean, what is going to work? I went through ECT. I don't know, she probably did ECT too. And because I begged the doctor to help me, you know? And she said ECT might help you. And then after that, she put me in a 3-month outpatient program at Sharp, Mesa Vista. I was there every single day.
Right.
And each time I feel, I get suicidal, I was thinking about her. And I was wondering, I said, nobody even noticed that she said something like that, and that was like a sign,
Mhm.
but I mean, you can't really tell.
Sometimes
But
you
some,
can't.
yeah,
tell.
you can't. I mean, they can be talking.
face, an unhappy face.
Exactly.
Everything is okay.
Yeah, because she was always like happy, smiling. When you came in, she would hug you and everything. And then that day she said, nothing works anymore. And nobody even caught on to that. This was just my feeling, and then the next day or a couple of days after, she was gone.
What would you say to someone now if they were thinking about committing suicide? What kind of insight or advice can you give them?
Well, I would just talk about my experience of the worst suicide attempt I did when I went into a coma, but I came back. So, I mean, I could have come back as a vegetable, as a crippled person, or
Right.
brain damaged, whatever. And it didn't happen that way. So it seemed like somebody up there was saying, I'm giving you a second chance, and use it to, if you're not able to help other people, at least show your family or yourself that, this is your chance to make your life better, and it's just probably talking about your own experience, I'm pretty sure, especially if you've gone there
Mm-hmm.
and came back. I mean, it's,
And you survived.
yeah, you've been there and you survived. So it doesn't always work. Somebody said you keep knocking on the devil's door, somebody's gonna answer, something like that.
What about you, George? Words of advice?
I would say, I would tell them that it's not an option, and that we should give them a number to the suicide hotline or the crisis line, or take them to the crisis house, one of the crisis houses, or even consider hospitalization as opposed to suicide.
What about if someone told you and asked you to keep it a secret?
I wouldn't keep it a secret.
You're a mandated reporter, right? Are we?
No, I
Yeah, I
think,
think so.
that's not an easy question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was at my thoughts immediately because I know how secretive I was.
Yeah.
And having to go through experiencing somebody else's issues about wanting to die. I think my initial thought would be, okay, I'm not gonna tell anybody, and then my guilt, I'm not telling anybody it hit me. And I don't think much time would go by,
Mm-hmm.
because a day could be the day.
It could be.
Well, somebody telling you that they want to kill themselves, but asking you not to tell anyone else, I don't think I would violate that confidence, because at least that means they're reaching out to someone, and if they're reaching out to someone, there's part of them that doesn't want to die.
How would
And
you help
by-
them?
By trying to convince them not to do it, and trying to show them the reasons to be alive to be a better thing
Mhm.
than to be dead, you know? And because I've got my own personal experience, I can speak on that.
Mhm.
You know, because the times I tried to kill myself, it didn't work.
Right.
But I killed myself 3 times shooting coke by mistake. So when I didn't want to die, I did. Right? And
But when you tried, you.
but when I tried it didn't work. And now I know being dead's not fun because I've been dead. And Elvis wasn't on the other side of the river waiting for me. You know,
And it's what is it they say? It's the permanent solution
to a temporary
to a
problem.
temporary problem.
Yeah, it's like, hang on a minute, you'll get through it.
Mhm.
And then you'll look back at it and go, I was gonna kill myself? Really? You know?
Because sometimes people go around, like I used to work in the county system, and I had this one friend, she was going around telling everybody she was going to kill herself. And of course, the supervisors, they're like mandated, they're supposed to report it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have to.
They have
Some
to.
certain people have to.
Yeah.
So George, sometimes there's this thought that people say, "Oh, these people are just doing this to get attention."
I didn't want anybody's attention at all. I just wanted to get on that bridge and go.
Yeah.
You weren't doing it for attention.
No, I really.
No. What about you? What do you think about that, James or Marie?
There's so much
You
pain.
think people? I mean, is that true? Oh, you're just doing it for
Yeah.
attention.
No, I
Some
don't even-
people,
yeah.
I think yes. And I think the people that are most insistent about telling someone all the time, I'm gonna kill myself, are the ones that don't really want to. Because the people that really wanna kill themselves,
They don't tell.
kill themselves.
Mhm.
They don't tell someone they're gonna kill themselves, because then someone might stop them.
For me, it wasn't attention. I wasn't even thinking of getting attention. There was just so much pain in your head.
It seemed like
just
you
wanna
didn't
do
want
it.
attention.
Mm-mm.
I mean, you hit it really well.
Yeah, I know, and I never thought of getting attention or sympathy or whatever,
Mhm.
because the pain in my head was so much that I didn't really care what other people thought.
Yeah.
I don't care if, they
Other
want-
people weren't involved in the thought
Yeah,
process.
it was just, there was so much pain, I just wanted to get
Yeah.
it over with.
Yeah, because I don't think it's a selfish thing.
Mm.
When you try to do it, you just do it. I mean,
Mhm.
when I say it's premeditated, I knew I wanted to die.
Yeah.
I didn't care about anybody, not my family, nobody. So it wasn't one of those things where I thought about doing anything else except dying. That was my motivating thought, dying. So there's no attention I was trying to get from anybody. It was just, it was about me.
Yeah.
And then after the fact, later, I realized how it would have impacted my family, that
Right.
I cared. But that was my last time.
But
of
not
trying.
while you were going through it.
Because some people say it's like a cry for help, right? Like when you keep saying, I want to kill myself.
Mhm.
Actually, they're crying for help, or screaming for help or something.
Mhm.
But
But you never said a word.
no,
Mhm.
so I wasn't even asking for help.
Right.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Because if you ask for help, they're going to stop you.
Right.
And that wasn't my intention.
That's true.
Right, that was
Yeah.
mine as well.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all
Thank
for
you.
participating today. I really, really appreciate your stories. I appreciate your honesty, and I know that by being open about what you've gone through, you're going to help someone else.